All right, Chaz, let's get right to it. These are the facts. The Reds are enduring their worst stretch of the season at the worst possible time. 2 weeks ago, the door was wide open. The Mets had gone through just about the same kind of thing the Reds are going through now. In the process, the Mets came back to the pack in the wild card chase. And when the Reds took 2 of 3 from the Angels to start that West Coast road trip, they were a season best 7 games over 500. They were a single game behind the Mets in the wild card chase and 4 games clear of the teams behind them, which is no longer the case. After that, the Reds lost 10 of 13 games. So, what question or thought were you left pondering in the press box after that head-spinning series against the first place Toronto Blue Jays?
Well, at one point I was working on a kind of a long feature, how the Reds turned their season around and the upward trajectory things were on. And I had some good stuff that I got leading up to that Diamondback series that might never see the light of day. This slide starting with situational hitting and defense, and it continued with the pitching staff just crashing. And a part of that was Nick Lodolo getting sick, but over the last 2 days, you could feel the pitching staff just crash.
So you just alluded to one of those things, stories Charlie almost wrote or might never write, right? Okay, there's one of those. File that one away. Maybe we'll revisit said story in a coming episode of Power Stacks. So with that, we say welcome in to Power Stacks, proud members of the Growler Podcast Network. Coming up on the show, where exactly did it go wrong for the Reds? The laundry list of reasons and missteps that have led to this late season skid. Nick Martinez has thoughts on that. Also, there was joy in Charlie's notebook this week when Sal Stewart showed up, right? I see you. Sal Stewart showed up. Tito's take on the confidence he has in the 21-year-old Stewart. And, what we call must-win games, those aren't always must-win games. It's a phrase that gets thrown about randomly, but without question, the Reds are staring at the biggest series of the season coming up at Great American Ballpark. All that's on the way. Andrew Abbott, by the way, has thoughts on that later in the show. But first, I wanted to agree with you on something you touched on just right off the top. I thought the Reds' best chance to stop the bleeding and reverse course was Tuesday at the ballpark. They had just won back-to-back games, which included the improbable walk-off win against the Jays in the first game of that series. And they had Nick Lodolo going the next day. Nick Lodolo was scheduled to start in Game 2 after Hunter Green had overpowered the Blue Jays for the most part in 6+ innings in Game 1. After that, I could see Lodolo having one of those casually dominant Lodolo games. I talked to him the day before about that start coming up, and his head was in the right place. He was frustrated after his last start against the Dodgers when he thought he pitched well, better than the result they got in that game in Los Angeles. He was ready. He felt the pressure. He welcomed it. He embraced it. And then he got sick, couldn't start. And Chaz, the trickle-down effect of Nick Lodolo getting sick, missing that start, was a disaster for the Reds the next couple of days.
They had 2 options on Tuesday morning, and as it became clear that Nick Lodolo wasn't going to be able to start, they could make it a true bullpen game, or they could call up 22-year-old prospect Chase Petty, who we've seen a couple times pitch in the big leagues. Petty's having a rough season, and talking to people, they've kind of wanted to give him the full year to develop and work on some stuff, and it just wasn't quite there yet. So they went with the bullpen game. They called up Reiver Sanmartin. They used their opener, Scott Barlow, pitching for the 3rd time in 4 days. Barlow himself didn't seem 100% and was homer, walk, double with an out or two mixed in there. And they were off. And then the worst outing that Brent Suter said he had had in years, where some execution just wasn't where he said it needed to be. And then all of a sudden it's, man, how do you get 9 innings in this game? And then not just that, then the next day, Zach Littell, the guy you need to give you length, only gives you 4 1/3. That, like, They even had Zach Maxwell, after throwing multiple innings on Tuesday, pitch again on Wednesday. Like, that's just where they were at. This unit had, well, not that they were asked to do too much, because of it was more circumstantial than anything, but they had to do too much over the week, or over the last 2 days. Here's Nick Martinez, who took the loss yesterday, talking about just how tough this grind has been in this Blue Jays series. Nice swing there by Goyle, but how'd you feel about kind of that outing?
I didn't execute my fastballs that well, up in the zone enough. The 2 balls that they hit hardest were fastballs that were not well executed. Other than that, some soft contacts that were hits. But the one that Vlad and to tie after that, then Vlad did rocket one for an out. But when I execute my pitches, they didn't really hit the ball hard.
You've got guys sick. You guys pitched a lot. Like, can you describe just what the challenge has been like for the pitching staff recently?
Yeah, we're going through it right now. Late in the season, and then you throw in just, little bug going around. And sit here and complain about it, or go to work and fight through it. We can play victim, or we can do something about it. So, I think we should do something about it.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are all hard workers. You guys do the right stuff. Like, how do you do that? Is it just the focus on the mound? Is it focusing on the preparation?
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of those things, right? Gotta keep fighting. Gotta keep swing your way out of it, and try to get into a groove here, hopefully this week.
Then last thing, just kind of how do you view this series against the Mets coming up?
Vital. Very important. Yeah, it's going to be a very important series. We've backed ourselves into a little bit of a wall, but we're going to be facing teams that we need to be facing to give ourselves a chance. So, some important games coming up.
The thing is that, I mean, this pitching staff as a whole has to carry the team. Like, that's just where they're at. The offense is fine, but the offense isn't going to discover this ceiling. And then in August, the pitching was fine, but not at the level of carrying the team. You had Hunter Green missed half the month. Lodolo and Burns missed most of the month. Martinez had a 5.1 ERA in August. Littell had a 3.9 ERA with a couple bad days. Singer was good, but then in the bullpen, you saw fatigue from Pagan and from Santian. Barlow didn't have good command at times. Ashcraft went on the IL. Martinez and Burns were supposed to go to the bullpen, but injuries in the rotation prevented that. You had Sam Maul struggle on his way to a demotion. So it already was trending in a certain direction. And then kind of the last Jenga piece was Lodolo's illness. And then in two big games, the pitching staff just collapses.
All right, let's go deeper on some of those reasons as we hit the leadoff spot. And first of all, before we completely move on from the Toronto series, I just want to say, after watching that team for 3 games, that team can mash. And there's a reason they're in first place. And they proved that team, the way that team is built, they've got some good pitching, but they don't always need good pitching to be a good team. We had a stat on the pregame show. The Jays lead baseball in wins when allowing the opponent 4 runs or more, meaning you want to get in a slugfest with that team, have at it. They're happy fighting that way. They don't mind, and they did that in a couple of games where the Reds scored 9 runs and lost. But just going back to those 3 days, there were a lot of Jays fans. I'm always glad to see that. There were Jays fans in the ballpark. They were everywhere. And there was a T-shirt that I saw at the pregame set that said, Bichette happens. And, Bo Bichette happened. So did Springer. So did Varsho. So did Kirk. So did Barger and Guerrero. It's a deep, dangerous lineup. Sam LaCure on the pregame show kind of described that team as, not just a good hitting team. He just said they find the barrel a lot. Doesn't always leave the park. It did a lot in that series, but they just find the barrel a lot. To the tune of 29 runs in the 3-game series, 38 hits, and 11 home runs. And watching that with the home runs in that ballpark, it kind of made me think how the Reds, how little it seems that they've gotten in the home run department.
You want to do this? Let's do this.
Well, let's just do a little bit of it. We've said before all season, it's been nice to see the Reds score runs and generate offense without being home run dependent. And that's the phrase I'm going to come back to, home run dependent, because we've seen teams that were that way. And then we have argued about teams that have won that way at Great American Ballpark in the past. But the Reds are one of only a handful of teams in baseball. I saw the stat. It wasn't more than 2 or 3 teams that don't have a 20 home run hitter on the roster. Elly De La Cruz is at 19 and leads the team. So just as you said, maybe you want to unpack this some. We let our mind wander from time to time over the course of the show. I'm watching balls fly out of that ballpark, and I'm watching in game 2, the Reds out-hit the Jays. But the Jays had more home runs. Those were more impactful swings, and the Reds lost. So where would you like to start unpacking the home run ball for this Reds team?
I'd like to start in a room that no longer exists.
Okay.
That would be the annex to the old media room in Goodyear, Arizona, in February it would be March of 2022. So it's coming out of the lockout. The lockout was kind of a reflection reset point for the organization. Nick Krall had his first full off, or it was full the year before, but like he was coming off his first full year being the guy in charge of baseball operations with the Reds. I was at minor league spring training when minor league spring training ended. I talked to Krall. I did a sit down with him. One of my favorite interviews I've done because Krall had a vision to share. We were sitting in that room that no longer exists. Krall is about to leave. And then he goes, wait, and he sits back down and he goes, I forgot to mention hit over power. We believe the home runs will come in our ballpark. He didn't say this part, but like the team that built its ballpark for Griffey and Dunn, they weren't chasing Dunn style hitters anymore. You'll take Ken Griffey if you can get him. That was an organizational stake that Nick Krall wanted to put in the ground. When he looked at, he didn't say this verbatim, but I mean, look at the 2020 Reds, and that was a slugging team. And then in the playoffs, they didn't score. They wanted there to be some more reliability, consistency, defense, and speed oriented, and then quality at bats. So that idea, that vision was there from a player acquisition standpoint. Now, I would say the biggest difference between David Bell and Terry Francona and their philosophies on hitting and how that's reflected by the hitting coaches that run the show is going all in on an at-bat versus approaching each at-bat situationally. It's almost like under the old, and I'm not taking any sides here. I'm not saying one's better. Under the old staff, it's like keep shooting because we believe 33% of these shots are going to get made. And under Terry Francona, it's move the runner over, call a situational hitting play, drop a bunt, manufacture runs. That is just truly more in line with kind of where Nick Krall started, but it's also gotten to the point where not that they're not telling these guys to not hit for power. I always go back to Spencer Sears saying to me, we heard it on this show, we're not trying to kick the ball around the yard. But not that it's not an emphasis, but it's just not there. And it's something that from a player acquisition standpoint and from a development standpoint, not that it's not being prioritized, but it's not enough of a part of the puzzle to be a part of who the Reds are. Then you look at the fact that, and it's various reasons for every guy, you can probably figure it out for each one, but Friedel has hit for less power. McClain has hit for less power. Steer has hit for less power. Elly over the last 2 months. Put it all together, and it's a team that has a very clear vision of what it wants to be offensively, but home runs just aren't enough of a part of that.
First of all, going back to when you were in the room where it happened in Goodyear. I agree with the philosophy. We've debated for years in Cincinnati, a team that just thought they would homer their way to wins. I agree with the philosophy. I like not being home run dependent. And I think you made the best point of all. I think this team is constructed to hit and have some power. It just so happens that some of the players you're counting on to have that power and hit the ball out of the ballpark haven't done it as much this season as either they have in the past or you would have thought that they would have this year. That happens. You can't avoid that. That's baseball. That's season to season. I'm in favor of the philosophy, but just watching that team with so many players, that team being Toronto, with so many players that at any time are going to hit the ball out of the ballpark or put a dent in the outfield wall because, as Sam said, they just find the barrel a lot. Man, that's something to see, and that's an intriguing part of the game. But going back to
real quick, one
Yeah.
more thing. Can I get one more thing on this? The Brian Hayes trade. Look at this as what Nick Krall and Terry Francona want the Reds to be. The problem is, though, home runs do give you a margin for error. Like Francona's even said, like, oh, in Boston, we kicked the ball, or we made all these errors, but then Manny hit a 3-run homer. Homers give you a margin for error.
Yes.
If you're not building and emphasizing and prioritizing pure power from a development and player acquisition process, then you have to be great with your team speed and with your defense. And that's what the Reds are trying to be. And we've talked about this a lot over the last month. The fact that what they're not getting on the bases and what they haven't gotten consistently enough in the field, that's it. That's the type of stuff that power could overcome. They might even try to get a power hitter in the offseason to offset the speed and defense they're not getting right now. But with the way this roster is currently constructed, trying to do the speed and defense thing, they don't have that. And then they don't have the power to make up for it at the end of the day. And so now they're a situational hitting team that's not good enough yet with situational hitting, that's not making enough of an impact on the bases, that's not playing clean enough, and doesn't have any sort of wild card to play at the end of the day in terms of a home run swing.
Back to reasons also for where they are. And at the end of the season, I think we're going to look up and you're going to look back across the months and the games and say, man, the Reds were relatively healthy this year in terms of games missed to injury. You're gonna feel good about that. You're gonna say the lineup was relatively healthy this year based on avoiding a lot of big long-term IL stints for some of your main players. But that's going to be misleading. That's going to be deceiving. There are no excuses in Major League Baseball. Terry Francona and the Reds would never try to make excuses. But for what Terry Francona has let on publicly over the course of the last few months, it's not hard to read between the lines and see that guys are playing with some things, injuries that are impacting their game. And you can kind of make a little list of them. You can talk about Elly De La Cruz and the quad. Spencer Steer, more recently, Tito said, hey, he's on a leg that he probably shouldn't be playing on after he started the season with a shoulder that he shouldn't have been playing with. I talked to Steer at one point in the season. He said, look, you got to play. I said, why do it now? Why not try it? He said, you got to play. If you can get out there, you have to play. And it goes back to, feeling as a young player that your position or your place on the roster is not completely secure. Once you get there to that point, you don't want to let any possibility exist that someone else, might take over for a couple of days, get hot, and then you get bumped down the ladder. So guys are playing. Spencer Steer, Elly De La Cruz, Miguel Andujar. Chaz, there are injuries here that have affected not only how they can play, but how much they can play. And that's played into this stretch without question when the Reds have struggled.
So I'm not saying the season's dead, the season's over. I don't like to do that anyway. What I am saying is that this very much has the feel of, not that I would ever do this, of you're a kid and you leave all your homework for Sunday night, and then it's Sunday night and you're really tired. That's how the Reds feel right now. When you look at the guys who are banged up that you mentioned, and I think those are huge individual parts of why the Reds are at where they're at this season. You mentioned Andahar. He's the most under-discussed story of the team. He's so hurt that he can only DH a couple times a week, and he was their hottest hitter in August. That is a big deal. You have McLean, always challenging, missing a whole year, coming back, full season, September. That's got to be tough. Friedel and how hard he plays and the effort and running into walls, and he was really banged up last season, and that hasn't been as much of the conversation this year, but look at how Friedel plays, and also he's had a tougher month before he got that off day. I put Friedel into this conversation. Jose Trevino, who I know has had a couple of nice games recently as well, but especially with Stevenson out, he's had to play way more than any starting catcher usually does, because they've just been reluctant to play Will Banfield, which I understand. So Trevino has been asked to do a lot. You look at the bullpen, Pagan, Santian, Barlow. Like, it's Sunday night, and kind of the lesson here for me is that, like, this is why you have to win in April and May and June, because if you're trying to go all in, pedal to the metal in September, when guys are already tired and gassed and unexpected stuff comes up like this illness, man, that is a tough spot to be. That kind of the only way to prevent is by going into the process with a margin for error, by winning early, by winning so much that you can work in more off days for your players, for your relievers, so you don't have to in June having to manage every game like a playoff game.
Terry Francona has been very clear every time he's asked this season. You win today. If you have a chance to win today, you win today. You don't worry about how you have to manage workload or the bullpen, 2 days from now or next week. And I'm in that corner. I agree. But then you start to see with some of the fatigue and some of the use at this point in the season, you have to find a way to combat that. I don't think you can avoid it. Combat it, overcome it, do some of those things. How many times, Chaz, have you written or said you can never have too much pitching? That showed up in this stretch. And you talk about the offense and some of the players and fatigue and playing hurt. In this 13-game stretch, the 3-10 stretch, there have been 5 games in which the offense has scored 2 runs or less. There have been 7 games in which the pitching and defense has allowed 6 or more runs. More than half the games, they've allowed 6 or more runs. That's just kind of a snapshot of statistical information that backs up what we're talking about in terms of the players and how they're impacted this time of the season. We talked to Andrew Abbott. Part of his focus in the offseason was being strong this time of the year. And I think that's subconsciously, that's probably part of every player's training program in the offseason. But when you get a reminder like this, or you get a taste of being at this point in the season and you've played a lot and you're banged up and you're tired, maybe that becomes more of a thought process for guys as they head into the offseason, because they're all tasting it right now. They're all feeling it right now at the most critical time of the season for this team. Noelvi Marte, on the other hand, seems to be the 23-year-old breakout season who, as we've described before and has been backed up by Tito, was freed up by a move to the outfield. All of a sudden, the weight was off his shoulders. The weight of the throw across the diamond from third base to first base was released when you set him free in the outfield, and now he's starting to show more and more of his offensive potential. And he's one of the guys, along with Ke'Bryan Hayes, who at this point in the season actually look better than they did earlier in the year.
It's funny, like, I think this is like the second time recently I've mentioned this guy's name on a podcast here. Like in 2023, Nick Martinez came up and he kind of like saved the Reds. I mentioned the save your homework for Sunday night type feel for where the Reds are at. And, the way to combat that is some guys come in with fresh legs, fresh perspective, just juice. And Noelvi Marte has had that buzz. Cabrian Hayes has had that buzz. An issue is the Reds haven't had. I guess you could put Phillips and Maxwell into this conversation as well. But aside from that, they haven't quite had that wave. And I guess the hope is that Sal Stewart will become part of that as well. Let's give him some time and see how that storyline unfolds. But for a team that's put itself in this corner, that's what you desperately need. And those are the two real positive stories with the Reds right now, Noelvi Marte and Cabrian Hayes.
All right, we're going to wrap up this segment by I'm going to offer you or ask of you, share a thought on Elly De La Cruz. We've talked about the fact that he's battling the injury, but he's become, I don't want to say a lightning rod, but he's put himself under the microscope by the fact that your best, most exciting player at this point of the season is still playing every day, but has struggled in the field, has struggled at times at the plate, has looked, obviously, for obvious reasons, visibly frustrated. Where do you stand on De La Cruz and what this stretch of the season means for the team in terms of his importance to the team and also for him as a young, developing star player going through this?
When I interviewed him a few days ago, that was the most frustrated I've ever seen him. And then obviously it's gotten worse for Elly over the last couple days. I think the biggest reason is the quad, but obviously the injury, it's not an excuse. It's not being used in an excuse, but it's a part of the conversation. So is the lack of protection he has in the lineup. But just frankly, he's just not playing well enough. I think it's as simple as that. I probably should take a deeper dive into the swing decisions and the bat path and the bat speed and all of those analytical, data, the pitch sequences, all that. But at the end of the day, for a team with limited upside already because of how they were built, the team with limited power already because of how they were built, and what Elly represents in terms of combating that with the upside that he represents walking onto any field, the ability to take over any games. I think he's just searching. I think he's tried this, he's tried that. He's looked for this, he's looked for that. And he's just kind of stuck. And he's just not playing well enough. And he's not the only reason the Reds are falling out of this race. He needs more help around him, certainly. But in June and July, it felt like Elly could carry this team in the way that, like, you see a Bobby Witt carry the Royals offense. And that's just not happening. And that's a disappointing part of the season that he's having, especially when you look at the fact that the strikeouts and the errors have been ticking up over the last couple weeks and what that represents.
Your star players, we say it, your star players have to be your star players. Strikeouts and errors, I think, are the most noticeable symptoms of a star player that is, as you said, is searching. And Elly De La Cruz is out there fighting it every day, wants to be out there, wants to help this team win. I think that's a good way to put it, though, searching while still trying to continue his development as a star player in Cincinnati. Time now for Tito's Take. Boy, let's take two. Tito's Take is what he tried to say.
Let's keep it in. Let's keep it in.
Oh, man. Yeah. Very clean. You, Chaz, as well as a very vocal contingent of Reds country, have been begging for Sal Stewart for a few weeks now. It was the subject of a past Power Stacks show. Sal Stewart is here, but it waited until September. As he arrived, has a couple of games. How do you take in the whole move to allow him this opportunity, but to have had it come in September the way that it has?
Well, first of all, I told you, Sal Stewart's family rules. Like, great vibes.
Yes.
No, the story to me is the fact that they're having Sal play first base. I bet a part of that is, obviously a part of that is Steer's leg and how he's been grinding, that they needed a replacement there. And there was just very little confidence in CES, and Sal was the bat they wanted to call up. Putting someone who has 2 career games in at a position, minor league games at a position in a playoff race, I think that's a great, Sal Stewart anecdote right there. Like, he'll just figure it out. He's just a ball player. They trust him. That old school nature. He's gotten some good help around him too. Now, at the plate, what does he have? 2 hits. I've noticed him out in front a lot. That's probably an adjustment he'll have to make. The Blue Jays attacked him pretty aggressively and relentlessly with that, both Tuesday and then in his pitch at bat on Wednesday, kind of looked the same as the at bats on Tuesday. So there's stuff to work on there. He's also had some hard foul balls, which is interesting. Gotta get all that timing down. But they need a spark. They need someone fresh, and Stewart is going to be playing most days.
In regards to first base, the old baseball adage is if you can hit, they'll find a place for you to play. And the Reds believe Sal Stewart can and will continue to hit. Here's Terry Francona on 21-year-old Sal Stewart and the team's belief in Stewart helping this team down the stretch.
Part of the reason is last couple of days McLean's really swung the bat, and Spencer's leg, he's been playing on a leg that I'm not sure he should be playing on, but because he's tough, he has been. So, and again, I talked to Matt even this morning. There's going to have to be some creativity here, to make this work, and we'll do that. But like you said, more often than not, things happen where it's like, well, you thought we were going to do this, now we'll do this. So we'll adjust as we need to.
What gives you confidence, what gives the organization the confidence to bring him here, to put him right in, and to think that he can help?
Well, we wouldn't bring him here and not put him in. That's one thing. I mean, if you bring a kid, he's going to play. You know what? Even back in spring training, I think, and I don't know who I told, but I said, this kid is advanced as a hitter, well, at least in my opinion, and he's kind of done nothing to make anybody think anything different this year. We've thrown a lot at him, went from AA to AAA, moved around positionally, just keeps hitting. There seems to be a really tough, I don't know if chasm is the right word, sometimes between AAA and the major leagues right now. I just think Sal is situated where I think Sal's going to hit in whatever league he's in. That's just how I feel.
I think I know your answer because you've given it before, that it depends on the person. Everybody's different. But what's been your experience with a young player or a young prospect given some of these opportunities like he's going to have here?
It depends what they do with it. I think Sal's will be good for us. I really do. I think his enthusiasm, sometimes having some youth, which we're young anyway, but you're at a time of the year where everybody's beat up, and I know he's played a whole year too, but he's going to be bouncing off the walls, and that's not necessarily a bad thing.
I didn't set that up entirely as well as I should have. The beginning of the answer from Terry Francona was obviously about what we just talked about why he would play at first base, and he said it's going to take some creativity, but he mentioned the Steer injury. He mentioned Matt McLean playing better recently as to why Stewart wasn't going to go in right away at second base. But you can hear the belief there that Sal Stewart is going to help. And going back to earlier in the season, when I think he first made that comment about Sal Stewart being an advanced hitter for his age and his experience level, he also said, speaking of both Sal Stewart and Hector Rodriguez, I think the quote from Tito was at that time, which was probably mid-season, was, we believe they're both very much a part of what we want to be. The Reds aren't what they want to be yet, but when they look at what they want to be, they see these players as a big part of it. And so that's Sal Stewart. And interestingly enough, he's about to get to go to San Diego on the road trip, see Manny Machado there. The relationship between the two, and Machado's video congratulating him on being called up. That's going to be a special part of that first road trip for Sal Stewart. But as we transition to Charlie's notebook, that takes us to the other important mentor and family friend in Sal Stewart's orbit, and that would be former Red Yonder Alonso, who not only has been a friend and a mentor, but has also contributed some equipment, some gear to young Sal Stewart.
It was right there, Brian. You could have said had a hand in his success. It was right there.
What did you say?
So I go up to Sal. He's played, as we've established, 2 games at first. I go, Sal, do you have a first base mitt? Because, like, for example, like Steer didn't when he started playing first base. And he goes, yeah, Yonder sent one to me. I'm like, oh, that's nice. And that's like, wait, no. Yonder sent Sal his first baseman that had just been sitting on the shelf for 10 years. And if that's not friendship, I don't know what is.
That's pretty cool. I kind of like that. While we're in the notebook and while we're talking about what the Reds want to be when they get to the point of what they want to be, let's dip into the minor league system. A couple of notes from you on a massive winning streak and some other things down on the farm. What do you got?
Dayton's won 15 straight, and frankly, this is incredible because Dayton was truly one of the worst teams in all of minor league baseball. I believe they were trending on like a 50 win pace or something for the season. And it's not like even still this team has a bunch of top prospects. I believe they only have two top 30 guys in the organization. That would be Luke Hayden, a guy who I was told in April, he's the under the radar pitcher to watch in the organization this year. I believe he's at an Indiana State, like an 8th round pick, who found some more swing and miss value and upside than maybe he got credit for coming out of college. The other top 30 prospect is speedster Carlos Jorge, who plays a great center, but is kind of still a work in progress. Another interesting prospect that's been a part of this 15-game winning streak has been Peyton Stovall. Peyton was kind of bucketed, according to a lot of draft evaluators, coming out of high school in 2021 in a similar tier as Matt McClain. Peyton went to college instead and struggled with injuries and never quite hit the ground running. Was a 4th round pick, but he's always had a nice feel for hitting. His position is a question, but he's getting an opportunity, or he has an opportunity, and he's been a big part of the success. And then after that, it's, frankly, a bunch of pitchers who aren't prospects, who are having an ERA somewhere in the 2s over this streak. Shout out to Dayton manager Vince Harrison. Clearly, they're playing just a strong brand of baseball for a team that's not lighting up the prospect charts. Heck, it's a team that traded its top prospect, Adam Soronowski, at the deadline in the Zach Littell deal. And then down in Daytona, too, they clinched a playoff spot. They've won 17 out of 21. You look at the farm system. All right, Hector Rodriguez is going to be the next guy we talk a lot about. I've got more work to do figuring out where Edwin Arroyo and Cam Collier are right now. The next guy probably, Hector could be a guy, certainly. But then after that, kind of the next guy in bold on my spreadsheet is Alfredo Duno. Teenage catcher, slug. If he wanted to, he could have bulked himself up and been a great offensive guard, but instead he's a big, also athletic catcher who at the Futures game, nobody had more energy than he did. He was celebrating. He was talking to everybody. He lit up the whole stadium. And he's been a huge part of their success. So has Tyson Lewis. We spoke about, I believe, in May when he posted like a 119 exit velocity, kind of rounding out the edges of his game, but he's very young. He's hitting well in Daytona, and he's got the tools, and he just kind of needs these reps to kind of put those pieces together. 3 more guys, just real quick to shout out. Kind of the under the radar pitcher I was told to watch going forward was John Pierre Ortiz. He's in Daytona. He was a former 2-way prospect who is now focusing on pitching and has kind of shown them something. Cole Schoenwetter, he's always been a tools upside. He's not having like this unbelievable season, but he's got some of the best stuff in the organization. And one more fun guy who I believe pitched fantastic last night, that's Sheng-En Lin. Sheng-En Lin had initially been a 2-way player in the organization who was DHing and pitching. He was doing now he's just pitching now. There's only one Ohtani. They've decided he was further advanced on the mound, but he has that athleticism. Like there is an athleticism that's required to do that. And I've seen clips where he can really spin a breaking ball. He's also like filled out and grown up. And that's kind of a part of the reason why this has been a strong year for him. So nice moments going on down on the farm.
For those of you listening or watching, we just went seamlessly from Charlie's notebook to Charlie's spreadsheet. Color-coded depth charts, prospect lists, and tidbits on players coming up through the Reds system. It is a deep, deep pool of information on Charlie's spreadsheet. Maybe we'll get a different segment at some point, Charlie's notebook and Charlie's spreadsheet. Also, before we leave the notebook, I'd like to say, it's September. We're talking about the September call-ups, and you've had a couple of football references, as I know that gets you going. You also look the part because you appear to have your fall attire on today. Is that one of the quarter zips that makes the rotation this time of year that you just dug out
Yes.
because you went, it's a little bit of a chill in the air today?
This is a top of the rotation quarter zip. I will also say, I don't know. I made it cold in my apartment yesterday, and then I just haven't gotten around to changing the temperature yet when the temperature dropped this morning. So I just threw this on. But no, this is a very high up on the rotation.
It's good.
I've
Good.
said this,
Top of
I've said this to Nick Kroll before. I very aggressively scout quarter zips. Those are very important to me for identification and acquisition. I've said that to Nick before.
I'm sure he appreciated that. Top of the rotation quarter zip for Chaz here in the month of September. All right, looking ahead is where we are, and after all the bad stuff that happened to the Reds during this stretch and the difficult things they're facing right now, post game on Wednesday at the ballpark after Francona and the Reds lost the series to the Jays, Terry Francona said, and I quote, "We're fortunate." What could be fortunate after that series and after that stretch? Well, he said, we're fortunate to be playing the team ahead of us. That team is the New York Mets. They're farther ahead of the Reds than they've been for the last several weeks. There is now also a team between the Reds and the Mets because the San Francisco Giants have won 10 of 11 games. Still, with the deficit is what it is, this is the biggest series of the year. You have 3 games head-to-head in your own ballpark, and the assignment is simple. You have to win. You have a chance to gain 3 games. That's not going to get you to the top of the mountain, but it's really the only hope you have of making the last 3 weeks of the season meaningful is this head-to-head competition. This series against the Mets starts with Andrew Abbott. So here's Abbott on urgency and opportunity facing the Mets at Great American Ballpark this weekend.
Some added pressure because we're behind the teams that, we were close to early on. We went through a bad stretch, but, it's baseball. It's going to happen to everybody. Everybody's been through one this year. So yeah, we just got to put our head down and focus on winning games. I mean, basically every win from here on out helps our percentage, helps our, postseason hopes. So, especially with the Mets coming into town, the team we are chasing. So, we just got to come prepared, try to handle business as best we can. And, we're just trying to make these 20 some games that we have left as perfect as we can get them. Obviously, like if we could go perfect, we would love to go perfect in those games and put the pressure on them. But, when they come to town, we're just going to have to put our head down and handle business as best we can and kind of almost play like the season's on the line against those guys.
Yeah, I think the season is on the line against those guys. And we're still waiting to see where Nick Lodolo fits back in. Terry Francona said he felt a little better at the end of the series, but he's not listed in the probables for the Mets series. And he would have been the Sunday starter, I believe, against the Mets had he been healthy, but we're waiting to see.
No, or had he been, I see what you're saying. Hot take rated. This is just pure reckless speculation.
Let it out.
I remember coming out of the All-Star break, Derek Johnson was talking about restructuring the rotation after the break. And he said, our biggest priority, win today's game. Let's start by lining the lefties up to face the Mets. And I believe both Lodolo and Abbott pitched in that series at Citi Field right after the All-Star break. So the Reds are off today. They also have another off day on Thursday, and you could kind of slot Lodolo in wherever because he had that bullpen day baked in. Could Lodolo just like piggyback Brady Singer on Saturday or even Hunter on Sunday because
Good
of
question.
where the bullpen's at, because of what lefties can do? Different tangent. And Brent Suter's not a matchup lefty. Brent Suter, this is a very pro Brent Suter podcast. The Reds don't have a matchup lefty on their roster. That's crazy. You shouldn't be in that spot, but they are. And having a lefty like Lodolo available, this is reckless speculation. Having a lefty available like Lodolo out of the pen, I haven't even done the math. I assume the math works. You'd be able to get through these games with your rotation lined up well enough. Maybe not because you do have 6 straight, but I bet you could manage it. I don't know. It might not work. True. I haven't even done the math, but I like the idea.
I do too. You called it reckless speculation, but I think if Lodolo is able to pitch, if he's past the sickness enough to be able to pitch, this is the time to be creative, right? This is the time to think outside of the box. I don't think you're going to get where you want to go continuing to do things exactly the same way or as they fit on the schedule that was previously made before you found yourself in a situation that you're in. So I think could he piggyback and help out in some way in the Mets series? I think that's a great question to ask, and we'll see if it gets answered at Great American Ballpark this weekend.
As I think about it for 5 more seconds, I guess this doesn't work because you'd still need a starter for Tuesday, and Lodolo wouldn't be off enough rest then. Unless you put Martinez back in the rotation, but he's pitched a lot, or you do another bullpen day, but it's the Mets. You got to sweep them. Let's do something. Win today.
Win today. Get creative, and this is the biggest series of the year. We continue to be impressed and thankful and appreciative for everyone who watches and listens to the show. We're getting into the last month of the season. We've heard from so many people from so many places. We've seen them in person at the ballpark. We get emails. And we just like to say, Chaz, Charlie's notebook is huge in Belfast, Ireland. How about that? I envision our guy Lee, who's part of the Stacks pack. I envision Lee in a pub in Belfast, Ireland, having a pint with his earbuds in, listening to Power Stacks. We heard from Lee. He's a longtime Reds fan. And Chaz, you've got him for football season too because he's a Bengals fan and he's listening and watching from Ireland. Lee, if I had a pint, cheers to you enjoying Power Stacks and being part of the Stacks pack. We appreciate that. You saw the email address. You can email us, powerstackspod@gmail. We're at an interesting point of the season. The talking points are endless at this time with where the Reds are right now. So we're going to keep doing this, and we hope you'll join us for the ride. Chaz, a pumpkin spice latte and your quarter zip, top of the rotation quarter zip. It's still just going to be black cold brew. I get it, but I like to think of you with a pumpkin spice latte in the Hallmark Channel this time of year, maybe a little fake fireplace in your apartment, just snuggled down. You need some downtime. You need some me time for Chaz to be able to keep this up. What you do with baseball and football.
You know what I got? How about 7:00 tonight? Live show at Tom's Watch Bar at MGM. Paul Diener, A. Morrison, Mark Shalafu, the whole Growler crew there. A big, huge show tonight that I'm looking forward to.
Okay, well, you rest up today to be ready for that. That's going to be a fun show, so head out to the banks and check those guys out. And we'll see you next time with more on those Cincinnati Reds on Power Stacks. Have a good one. We'll see you.